So over the past several weeks, we've seen OpenAI and Codex really make a lot of leaps and bounds in what it's offering to the marketplace. We've saw the launch of GPT 5.5, and we've seen so many quality of life measures just added to Codex. But we must also acknowledge all the work that Anthropic is doing and how they are really creating an infrastructure for business systems to be created within their ecosystem. And that includes, over the last several weeks, launching features like Claude Managed Agents and Claude Routines. In this video, I want to kind of get further into Claude Managed Agents and how Anthropic has now actually built out an infrastructure for you to be able to build autonomous agents and host them and run them within actually the Anthropic servers. And so these Claude Managed Agents, just to kind of provide some context around it, if you think about how we used to sort of go about building automated workflows, we would use Zapier, Make, N8N, and we would have some sort of trigger event that would set these workflows off. There would be a task that happens, some sort of processing in the middle of it. That's why it's considered a middleware. And then it would give us an output. Now, we still have those same sort of events that occur to trigger the workflow, but now you can give something like a Claude Code or one of these LLMs access, and using these different connectors or third-party software, that would be the equivalent of like modules within Make and APIs or MCPs. You can do the same sort of task and then get a result. And you don't actually then have to deal with a lot of the issues that will come with erroring out in the middle of these tasks, because Claude can also work through those errors autonomously. And so that is Claude Managed Agents for you. With Managed Agents, typically you are the one that sets off the agent to run, but it runs on Claude's infrastructure. With routines, you can actually set it so that it happens on a schedule or happens when a specific API call is fired or a GitHub repo is updated. Today, we're going to be dealing with managed agents. And just to kind of touch upon the UI, because Anthropic has actually built a UI for it, you'll see when you come into this space here that they already have a couple of like very more sort of technical examples of these managed agents that you can build out. And you'll see on the left side here what you can do to kind of structure them. So quick start, you literally just come in here and you type in the agent you want. As you build out these agents, they'll get compiled into this space. And we're going to do an example of Buildium today. So I have some Buildium workflows up here. This is a workflow around pulling rental units from the Buildium property management platform and then listing them out or updating them on a Google Sheet in my Google Drive. Have another similar example where you pull leases and do the same thing, update those leases onto a tab on your Google Sheet in a Google Drive. And these are all tied to Make.com. So Make is a workflow automation platform that has now rebranded as an AI automation platform. And so whether it's these more traditional workflow automation platforms or the AI platforms like Claude, they're all sort of converging to do similar sort of things. Make is definitely still more in the way of deterministic. Claude is definitely more in a way of judgment based, but they're all sort of converging and adding what the other doesn't have. And so on the left side here, you'll see that you also have sessions. The sessions are each time you run the agent. You have environments where the environment is a cloud space that is created in order to kind of give the agent boundaries so that it is protected and secure. This cloud instance is where the agent goes into every time it runs. And so you can have different environments that it runs in. You have a credential vault. This is where you would put API key or usually MCP connection. And you can give it access to these credential vaults so that it's able to access different connectors. In this case, it would be the Google Drive connector. And then you also have memory stores where it can store previous runs that it's done. The big thing to kind of keep in mind is that there is a cost to all of this. So this connects to the Claude API. So this is not part of your Anthropic subscription. This is the Claude API. So however much it costs to use. In the case of what I've been doing is Claude Sonnet 4.6. You can be using Opus. You can be using Haiku. Just keep in mind that there is going to be a cost to it. And so if you want to get started building an agent, all you do in the Claude Managed Agents interface is you come in to Quick Start, and literally just type in what you want to build. So simply, in this case, I'm going to do one for pulling leases from Buildium. So I'm going to say, help me create an agent that pulls leases from the Buildium property management platform using their REST API, and then lists them out onto a Google Sheet in my Google Drive, and then just put that forward. Be mindful that Anthropic has a lot with rate limits, so you want to make sure that you space out your requests. If you put the next request too quickly, it may it may error out. So just put a little spacing between the requests. So then I said to continue to refine. So it says, what would you like to adjust about the config, the Buildium API field, the captures, the Google Sheet layout, or something else? As I read it further, this looks okay. I'm going to say this looks okay. And then it should now take me to configuring the environment for the agent. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, create this agent. So now it creates the agent. And then the next step is to configure the environment. So the agent is now created. An agent is a reusable version configuration. It defines the persona, model, and tools, but doesn't run on its own. You spin it up individual sessions for each time you want it to do work. So next, we're going to configure the environment. The environment is a container, cloud container that your agent runs inside. And so it's asking, do we want to use an existing environment or create a new one? I'm actually going to go ahead and create a new one. So it's going to ask, what network does this agent need? I'm going to say, you're going to want to say unrestricted because it's probably not going to be able to do anything if it involves connecting to the internet. So I went ahead and put unrestricted. So the environment is ready with unrestricted networking. Let's move on to testing. So now we'll go ahead and test it in a session. So now session is running. Before we kick off the test, an agent needs a couple of concrete values to my Buildium API in the Google Sheet name or Drive folder to write to. So it's asking which vault should hold credentials. I'm going to say for the Google Drive MCP server, so the production MCP vault should, but you know what? Just for the sake of this example, I'm going to say create a new vault. This credential will be shared across this workspace. Anyone with API key access can look at it. That's fine. Connect to my email, continue. So this should connect it to my Google Drive MCP. Now let's also ask for the details. The agent needs to call Buildium and know where to write the sheet. What should the agent name the Google Sheet? Let's just name it Buildium Leases. Updating the system prompt to bake in the sheet name and remind the agent to use the Buildium API key. All right, so saying the agent's not ready to test, send it your Buildium API credentials and it'll pull your leases and write them to a Buildium lease Google Sheet. Then I'm going to say, let's keep refining, add in the Buildium API credentials so it knows what to use to pull. And I'm just going to paste in the Buildium API credentials. All right, so now it's added in the Buildium API credentials. We can go ahead and test run. It's live. It says to send the first message. So I'm going to say here, pull, as it's already kind of previewed for me, pull all active leases, write them to the Buildium Leases Google Sheet. We'll go ahead and let that do its thing and see how it does. So it said got all 362 leases, 265 are active. Now let me fetch property details. So you can see all the tool calls that are happening here. You can see what it's doing as it's thinking. You can see all the messages that are being sent in the process, all the results, what the model is doing, the requests that are being sent. So if I click on the top right here, it says view session, then you can see a different view. Here at the top, you see all the places where the agent is running and places where the tool calls are happening, agent is running, tool calls are happening. We'll see what happens in the next step. You can also see the credits that are left. I have $2.29 left. That should be enough to finish the run. Be mindful that this is directly connected to your Anthropic, Claude API. Now it's saying create file. So I imagine it's probably creating the Google Sheet file in the drive. All right, so it says done. The Buildium Leases Google Sheet has been created and populated in your drive. It was filtered to 265 active leases. It went through all 362 leases currently in Buildium, which is 8 pages, built all 7 columns, and it gave you a URL to the sheets. And so all we then have to do is click on this. It'll open up all the leases in our Google Sheets. And the same output that this workflow right here in make.com would give you, all these steps from the time where you trigger the workflow. So that's what 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. All of this would take place now just with Claude doing it on your behalf. So if I just go ahead and go to the agent, we now have the agent created and we can run it at any time. And that's how you put together the managed agent. So literally all I did was just type in a short prompt for what I wanted to build, and then you just give it access to different tools. So gave it access to the API for Buildium, gave it access to the Google Drive connector, so that's able to either pull Google Sheets or create new Google Sheets and list them into the Google Drive. And just depending on what you need built, maybe you give access to the web, maybe you give access to other connectors, and whatever Claude can do is kind of like the I'd say how expansive this agent can be. And so that is how these managed agents go. I would say it's still a little bit rough around the edges. I think that Anthropic can do better, just like with the visual around it, because any sort of errors that happen, it self corrects those errors. You can't necessarily see as much as you would like. You still have to kind of trust the agent to an extent. But what I'm saying, as long as it's able to make it through the run, then it's pretty effective and reliable. I do think there's still something about being able to kind of see, the visual makeup through like a make, but as long as the results themselves work, then I'm with this. But overall, this is how the managed agents work, and pretty much any sort of like workflow you would like to do, you could probably do them within Claude now, as long as you're just mindful of the requirements, from like a compute standpoint. And if there's any specific workflow you'd like to see built or done, feel free to just put that into the comments or shoot me a message. Would be happy to kind of try them out here. This is kind of like a demo example of the kind of things that you can do and how it connects to make.com and some of the more sort of, I guess, legacy ways that, or what would now be considered legacy ways of building out automated workflows. So hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys on the next one.